At what point will you give yourself permission to be happy? To be peaceful? There is a never-ending amount of work we have to do on ourselves. So you cannot say, well, I'll be happy when, because there is no end date to healing, to improvement. And you may realize that happiness comes when you accept yourself, that you don't need to be any different than you are at this moment. And any idea that what you are looking for is in the future is keeping you from what you want. You see, all of our struggle, all of our suffering comes when we resist reality as it is. When our mind resists the present moment. And we resist because we want things to be other than what they are. But things can never be other than how they are at this moment. Really look. Yes, change is happening. Growth may happen, healing may happen. But in this moment now, nothing can be other than how it is. And so anything other than acceptance is futile. It's nonsense, it's crazy. And it takes away your peace and happiness. Now that doesn't mean you don't also strive to improve. That doesn't mean you can't also focus on healing yourself, healing this body, healing this mind. It is coming to the recognition that our resistance to life is creating massive amounts of suffering. And that if you can let go of this resistance, all the healing takes place naturally. The problems work themselves out by themselves. And you don't have to worry about how things are going to happen. Think about it this way. If we are resisting the present moment, this by default means we are in a state of lack because we are not getting what we think we want. And in this state of lack, you cannot receive anything because your entire reality is filtered through this lens of the mind. And so you will only be able to see more lack, more scarcity, more problems, more struggles. And yet when you accept reality, you enter into a state of gratitude and abundance. And you begin to see abundance everywhere. Our minds can only focus on one thing at a time. So you're either focusing on the negative story or a positive one. And whatever story you are focusing on is shaping the world you are experiencing. And that is what keeps most people a slave. They say, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills this month, rather than look at all the things I already have. Look at the abundance I have already received. You see, people say they believe in God or they have God in their life, and yet act without faith every day. They act as if God didn't exist at all. Because when you worry, when you have fear, when you have concern, it means that you are only focused on yourself. But when you are focused on God, you cannot experience these things. Fear may arise every once in a while, but only because temporarily you have taken your attention off God and focused it on your problems. And because where we focus our attention, that is where energy flows, and where energy flows, that is what grows. And so when you focus on problems, you get more problems. And when you focus on God, you get more God. That is why it's funny when atheists say, well, there's no evidence of God. Well, you have spent a lifetime of not looking. You have not yet tried. And in the same way, all people have these assumptions about reality, about the way things are. And those assumptions shape the way they see the world, and they say, yes, this is the truth. But we don't realize that the moment we assume something, our mind hyper-focuses on all the information that reaffirms our assumption. That is the law of assumption. This is why the law of assumption is one of the most powerful laws in the universe, because it shapes reality. We often do not believe the truth, but things become true because we believe them. Now, I'm not saying there is no objective reality. I'm saying there is no objective reality apart from your subjective awareness. And in between those two things, your subjective awareness and objective reality, there is an infinite amount of information filtering your experience. And so, if you are struggling, if you are unhappy, if you are not peaceful, if life is not going the way you want it to go, it is because the information that is in here, that filters the space between our subjective awareness and objective reality, This information has been corrupted by trauma, by conditioning, by false beliefs, and that at any moment you can begin looking at life differently, and the world around you will change to reflect this new belief. And so, only things in which you give your attention to can sustain life. If you do not feed a belief, it cannot survive on its own. If you give life to a negative belief, the positive beliefs die. And so too, when you focus on positive beliefs, the negative beliefs begin to fade. But you might be able to see how we get so stuck, because we look outward and say, yes, this is reality, but this is illusion. And by illusion, I mean the illusion of separation. And the implications of this, you realize that things cannot happen to us that we do not attract. And if bad things happen, it is not that it is your fault. But if you want to change the things that happen to you, you must change what is within. If you identify as a victim, you can only attract experiences that will make you a victim. Think about the tragic relationship between police officers and minorities. Let's say a black child grows up in a poor neighborhood in the ghetto, and all the family members around them say, look, cops hate us. They kill us on the streets for no reason. You need to be afraid. You need to watch out. And that child grows up being afraid of cops, saying cops are my enemy because they kill us for no reason. And every time they look at a cop, they project negative energy onto them. Their body is flooded with fear chemicals, fight or flight, because what they see potentially threatens their survival. And so when they interact with the police, there is war before even a single word is spoken. And the police officers think the same thing about the minorities. They say minorities kill police. These people are dangerous. And so they do not approach the situation to make peace. They approach the situation with their fingers already on the trigger. Because if it comes down to it, somebody's got to die, and it's not going to be me. That is what life is like when you live as a slave to the animal kingdom. A slave to fear and animal instincts. A slave to separation and illusion. And so you can see, if my reality is shaped in such a way in which, for instance, I hate police officers, then I will naturally attract situations that make me hate police officers even more. Because I have a vested identity in this made-up story. I co-create this hellish reality because I believe the evidence that is being presented to me. But then I continue to feed it and reinforce it through my energy, through my belief. But you do not have to live in such a world. But you have to let go of the belief that the world that you are seeing is the real world. Because it's not. It's just you seeing you. Which means that when you change, the world changes. But do you see how tricky the illusion is? That when you get some kind of bill in the mail and you look at it and you have fear, how could I look at it any other way? This is a problem and I am going to have to deal with this problem. And I would say that is the pain of living in this illusion, that you have to believe all of this nonsense and that you cannot see things any other way. You are forced to be blinded to the absolute abundance of God. And so you are constantly cut off from your blessings, forced to struggle and survive day by day because you focus your attention on things that do not serve you. And if only you focused on the light, all of the darkness would dissipate. If you only focused on all of the things that are right in your life, the wrong things would fade into the distance. You see, people suffer because they have forgotten God. And we would rather do things our way than have to rely on something that we cannot see. But we can only not see because we haven't been looking. Because the moment you see and the moment you start looking, you see it everywhere. You see what you want to see. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody is so focused on their assumption and they gather evidence that says, look, no, my assumption is right. And yet you listen to them and you know that they are stuck in their own little world. Because in this state, we block out all of the evidence that is contrary to what we believe. Because if we were to see that evidence, we could no longer sustain this identity. And that is the whole game. The ego manipulates us to reinforce a sense of self-identity by getting us to believe in these stories, so that we constantly keep feeding the ego, feeding the stories, and so that the ego can survive like a parasite on our energy. That is why, for instance, you cannot just tell people the truth. I mean, you speak the truth, but as Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine, because people who are not interested in the truth are not capable of hearing it. And what you find is that most people are not interested in hearing the truth. They want to reaffirm their own sense of self-identity. They are happy and content in their own little world, unaware of the suffering they are experiencing. You can see it in people. They say, no, I don't like the drama. And they're always talking about drama. They say, no, I don't like the problems and the struggle, and yet they are always struggling. Why is that? It's because the struggle is familiar. They get to say, I am he who struggles. And that makes me valuable. I can say, yes, I am somebody, this is who I am. And I can complain and say, look at how I am done wrong. Poor me. All of the happiness and the peace that we are to experience comes from letting go of these stories, of letting go of the need to be somebody, to stop ruminating on the past and worrying about the future, to know that God has already solved all problems, and to simply let go of these burdens, because you cannot be at peace and carrying bags of rocks on your shoulders. You cannot be happy in endless suffering. We must come to see that all of our suffering is psychological, and that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And that if you were to stop psychological suffering, the pain of the body is not that bad. That you can tolerate it, but we cannot tolerate the extra burdens that we place upon ourselves. You see, we try to get happy by changing the external reality, but you cannot hope to find lasting happiness in a temporary world. If you go on vacation, you still have to bring yourself with you, and all of your problems, and all of your difficulties. As I like to say, it's not the house that's haunted, it's you.